So I'm going to stop and ask, I see some of them in the room, and I wonder if they will take this opportunity to have a few minutes, because we want to give everybody a chance to talk. But I know they've been popping up with a lot of folks, and I have some areas of disagreement, but maybe we can find some common ground, we'll see. But go ahead.
I feel like you're talking to me.
I am, man. I'm so jealous of your hair. Can we agree on hair equality, man? Can that make you feel so jealous?
Venmo you some hair, I would. I got a mic, or should I just...
Just go. People can hear you.
All right.
It's a small room.
Hello, Senator. My name is Ruben, and I'm an African-American Jew.
Where are you from?
I'm from Detroit.
Where about? My mom's from Detroit.
Okay, well, I live on Rosa Parks. Yeah. I'm not going to give everybody my but you'll know where that is.
Yes, I do.
So my name is Ruben. I'm an African-American Jew, and I, as you seem to be aware, I'm deeply frustrated about the ways that politicians in both parties frequently cite their support for Israel as proof that they're working to fight anti-Semitism. Those are two separate things to me. And I don't want my tax dollars being used to fund the Israeli military's many documented human rights violations against Palestinians, particularly Palestinian children. We know for a fact that many of them are snatched up in the middle of the night, detained without due process, tortured, abused. And I know that more and more young voters like myself feel this way. And I believe that any Democrat who wants to be seen as a progressive needs to stop giving Israel a blank check with zero accountability. So I wanted to ask you, that's why I'm here, if you would commit to sponsoring the Senate version of Representative Betty McCollum's No Way to Shoot a Child bill. And as Senator or President, would you commit to any form of accountability for Israel, who receives $3.8 billion in funding from American taxpayers' money? I know that we could use that here.
Thank you very much for that. So first of all, I will commit. I haven't read the bill, so I won't commit to it until I read it. So I commit to you that I will read the bill.
It's a great bill. You should read it.
I will read it. But this goes to deeper issues too, because we right now have a real challenges in the Middle East, and there's people's rights, and that just in that neighborhood being violated in ways that don't sit with this country. We give Saudi Arabia a tremendous amount of money, and they're violating LGBTQ rights, violating women's rights. We definitely have seen human rights violations all throughout that region. And so this is why I go on there multiple times to meet with Palestinian leaders, to go to the West Bank, and I saw things that were deeply disturbing. It's why I fought this administration about pulling their resources, things to give access to clean water and affirm other basic human rights. I do believe that Israel has a right to exist, and I believe it has a right to defend itself. One of the things that has me deeply concerned right now is terrorist groups like Hezbollah have more sophisticated weapons to shoot at the state of Israel. And so these are things that I feel very proud that I've supported the Iron Dome to stop the kind of rocket attacks that are getting worse. I've gone out to see the way our taxpayer dollars are spent to stop the tunneling technologies that have been used to abduct Israelis. So this is a complicated, layered issue. I'm going to look at the bill.
It's not that complicated. Do you believe Palestinian children deserve freedom, dignity, and safety?
I believe yes.
Furthermore on that, as a Palestinian, I'd also say, hi, my name is Mo. I'm actually coming from New Jersey. I'm from Central Jersey.
What town?
Hazlitt. It's a small town. I'm not sure if you know what it is, which is totally fair. It is a very small town. I have my remarks here written down. So I personally am a student activist, and I've been arrested.
And where do you go to school?
Go to school in D.C.
Okay. Jersey schools weren't good enough for you?
I'm based in Jersey, but I wanted to pursue politics, so I said DC.
You got a great rebuttal. Like you could have said, "Yo, why'd you go to Stanford?" Go ahead.
I've been arrested for my activism before, and I had to face my biggest fear in being arrested as a person of color, going and spending time in jail because I believe that my future is teetering on the edge of life and death for multiple reasons. And a big reason is because I am part of the Palestinian diaspora, and therefore I had the privilege to write and my right to resist in this country, but Palestinian children don't have that right. And like my counterpart said, not only are a lot of kids snatched in the middle of the night, 91% of Palestinian children who are charged with offenses that they often are not allowed to know what their charge is, get snatched up in the middle of the night. And furthermore, 43% of them, that's almost half, do not get a first meal until more than 10 hours in the middle of the night. And while I think it is great that you decided to talk about in the Middle East and what is going on there, because we do need someone who knows foreign policy very, very well with how tensions are going. I need you to talk more about Palestinian children and what's going on there. So I'm going to ask you again. I understand you haven't read the bill, but I want to know what your firm steps and commitments are when it comes to Palestinian children. Not Iran, not Iraq, Palestinian children. And how are you, again, going to end the atrocities that are happening in this place, especially, again, when there are $3.8 billion going towards the Israeli military and funding them when they are literally under investigation by the International Criminal Court for violating human rights and perpetuating war crimes. War crimes, Senator Booker. So please answer my question. How are you going to end both Palestinian children being detained and their human rights being violated, and how are you going to go about fixing the problem of the money that we're giving to Israel?
So how I'll do it is when I'm President of the United States, we're going to start funding humanitarian projects again in the West Bank and Palestinians in general. We're going to refund the East Jerusalem Hospital. We're going to make sure we're continuing to fund access to clean water. We're going to stop this erosion that this president has done, which I think is not supporting the two-state solution, and frankly supporting things within the Netanyahu administration that have been undermining that pathway. We're going to do everything we can under my presidency to make sure that human rights are defended, because this nation needs to lead with its values again.
Is one of those things redirecting the aid to the Israeli military to Palestinian children instead? Because again, that money is going directly towards harming Palestinian children. So I would love if you would commit right now to redirect the aid that's going towards human rights abuses instead of going to children, especially in Gaza, which is now, by the UN's definition of livable, completely unlivable. Completely unlivable. Whether it be access to water or access to food. They count their calories in Gaza and keep them on a subsistence, barely living, subsistence way of living to their food and caloric content. So can you promise me that you're going to redirect aid from Israel to Gaza and to the West Bank?
I will promise you that I will stand up and fight for human rights of people in, frankly, the Gaza area, West Bank, and in that region, especially understanding that there is real trials going on. But the trials in Gaza, you know that Hamas there has attacked Palestinian children as well. They've done things that literally have put them in peril, like putting their rocket sites in schools and hospitals, which is directly using children as human shields. So again, the reason why I've gone to the West Bank, the reason why I've gone to the border in this country, the reason why I've gone to African nations to stand up for the rights of LGBTQ children. My entire life, I've been fighting for human rights, and love of country is a wonderful thing, but love should not stop at the border, and the policies of this country should be affirming peace in that region and human rights for everyone. Go ahead, your hand up.
I'm a resident of Mount Vernon. I grew up in Vineland, New Jersey. I'm also Jewish, and I look around this room and I don't see anyone else that I know here that's Jewish. And I am not prepared. that I knew. I'm not prepared like these two very articulate young men. And I don't absolutely.
With great haircuts, by the way. Pardon? I was just joking. I said with great haircuts.
Yes, which I've envied my whole life, but the hair like that. But anyway, I just do want to say that there are two sides to every story, and I really like your response to them.
Thank you very much. Can we do two more for this group, and then we'll do so one, and then who's the second person who wants to speak in this group? And then we'll go to them. Then is it okay with the group if we go back to the folks who live in the community?
Yeah.
All right.
As a Jewish student, I'd like to respond to that because I have a related but different concern, and that's that I'm a student at Brown University, and in the wake of the anti-Semitic massacre at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh in 2018. Me and my other Jewish friends were reeling with shock. We were feeling unsafe in this country and on our campuses. And days after the attack, you used the deaths of 11 Jews as a platform to announce your support for an anti-BDS law, which would further criminalize Jewish students and our Palestinian allies. Instead of targeting the white nationalism which endangered us, you played a cynical and frankly anti-Semitic game of politics with our lives and attempted to strip our constitutional rights, and that was deeply hurtful to me. While I appreciate that you ultimately voted against the bill, your use of this harmful framing makes me deeply concerned about the fate of Jewish and Palestinian solidarity activists under your presidency. And I want to ask if, as president, you will commit to fight for us by combating not only combating white nationalism, but reversing Trump's executive order on anti-Semitism, which defined Judaism as nationality and opposing all conflation of anti-Semitism with Palestinian and Jewish activists who are fighting for justice for these Palestinian children, for justice for Palestinians in Gaza, fighting for freedom.
Thank you so much. I didn't get your name.
I'm Zach.
Sorry, Zach. So we can disagree on the framing because the way you made that sound, it just did not reflect my heart nor what we did. But we can disagree. That good people can disagree. And we clearly, Zach, are a good person who is very, very concerned. You can tell by the passion in your voice about these issues. And so when you asked your question that you asked at the end is, will I stand up against white nationalism? Yes. Number two, will I, the second part of that question was this idea of not talking about these issues in an international context, but talking about the rising levels of violence against Jews in this country. Which is not only rising levels of violence, but rising levels of property destruction and more. Absolutely yes. And so we may not agree clearly, Zach, on a lot of the issues that you're discussing, but my whole life has been about dealing with this issue because your justice as a Jewish American, my justice as an African American, and someone's justice as a white American, these are interwoven. As James Baldwin said very strongly when Angela Davis was arrested. She said they're going to come for you. If they come for you in the morning, they're going to come for me at night. And so that's the passion with which I drive. And I'm going to go to the last.
I'm sorry, but I'd like to respond to that because Angela Davis stands up for a free Palestine, and she stands up for freedom for all people everywhere. And I'm sorry, but when you can say all you want about fighting white nationalism, but when you say that when you compare people that are fighting for BDS the same way we did BDS against South Africa, another apartheid state, you are minimizing anti-Semitism in America, and you're making me and my Jewish and Palestinian friends unsafe, and you're aligned with Trump on that. So I don't want yes, you are. This is Trump's executive order.
Let's just finish this.
I'm sorry. And I appreciate that you are committed to fighting white nationalism. I see that in your career. I see that in your criminal justice reform record. But I want a firm commitment that you understand that criticizing Israel and fighting for human rights is not the same as anti-Semitism, and that you will cease that comparison and cease supporting any bill that suppresses our free speech when we're fighting out for human rights.
So Zach, and then we're going to go to the last question over here on this issue that I'd like to start.
Executive
I'm sorry,
order
over here.
please.
That's where you want? Yeah. Okay. So Zach, so first of all, clearly we're not going to be in agreement. And trust me, I have a feeling I know, maybe not as much as you, but know a lot about Angela Davis. Malcolm X said, it's hard to find, you can search the world 2 times over, but you're never going to find 2 people who agree on everything. My beliefs on the line with Angela Davis or Malcolm X's completely, but they are heroes to me. So please don't minimize my love and admiration for great heroes from the African American community or any Americans, just because we don't agree across the board on the issues. And when it comes to combating anti-Semitism, and you can keep speaking as if you speak for all Jews, in the same way I don't speak for all blacks. And so I just want to let you know, this is an issue I was dealing with before I was becoming a United States Senator. I was writing articles about not just anti-Semitism, but black-Jewish relations. I've been dealing with these issues my entire life, speaking for groups like the ADL who are against, who work every day to not only deal with Jews, but deal with racism and bigotry in this country as a whole. You and I come from the same place, a commitment to justice. We may disagree, but I honor you, and that's why I wanted you to have a chance to speak, and I appreciate it. So let's go to the last question.
Okay. So, like many other Ashkenazi Jewish people,
Could you forgive me for a second? What's your name?
Hi, my name is Lila. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and I go to school in Ohio.
Where do you go to school?
Oberlin.
Lila, why did you say it almost hesitantly, like you didn't want to say it? Because my friend from Brown was just like proud. He's like, Brown. So Oberlin.
Okay, so like many other Ashkenazi Jewish people in my community, my great-grandparents embarked on dangerous journeys of long distances to reach safety, freeing the violence of pogroms in Eastern Europe. As you know, there's been a recent wave of white nationalism emboldened under the Trump presidency. There were the recent anti-Semitic attacks against Persian synagogues in LA. There was Muncie. I am terrified and heartbroken about the violent anti-Semitic attacks against Jewish communities across the United States, which is why I am disgusted and disappointed that your response to this anti-Semitism is supporting the U.S. in providing military funding to Israel in the form of Apache attack helicopters and Hellfire missiles, which in 2014 were used to kill 1,500 Palestinian civilians, including 500 children. These attacks were were called war crime by the UN. This does not make me safer here and is being used to murder hundreds of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. As my friend Mo asked before, as a progressive president, would you commit to stop using Iowans and my taxpayer dollars to fund the slaying of Palestinians? It is not making us safer here, and I don't feel safe, and the money is being used to murder people.
So, first of all, I appreciate that, and the safety, the feeling of safety in our communities all around the country, whether it's gun violence, whether it's rises in anti-Semitic attack, or rising against, like, attacks against Latinos, friends of mine, who are in the Sikh community, see rises in attacks, and I appreciate that. And again, we have just different takes on it. I think when Hezbollah is firing rockets into Israel, that Israel has a right to defend itself. Excuse me, Hamas.
Are they defending themselves by jailing Palestinian children? Are they defending themselves by taking a blockade, which is making Gaza to defend human rights violations?
Sit down.
You're talking about killing civilians, and you're talking about a
I'm sorry, you cannot keep pivoting that. You have to address what is happening.
Let him finish.
We only have the chance to get Senator Booker to Mount Vernon this one time.
He
Yes.
asked us to
Yes.
speak to him, and we're speaking to him, and we're
You
asking
had
him to
your
be
say.
ignored and not pivoting to talking.
There are a lot of people who would like to
I know.
ask questions. We could wrap this up, that would be great.
So the last thing else, I just want to say, Zach, that I don't pivot to talking points. If there's anything people know about me, these are things I care very personally about and very deeply about. And the lives of people in that region, is any area of the country, I'm on the ranking member of the Africa subcommittee, and I spent more time going to the Middle East than any place. It's because I care about human life and human dignity that I do those things. And so again, if this country, we talk about challenges with foreign policy. I mean, when we saw attacks on our country, you know, we did things in response to those attacks that I don't agree with, like invading Iraq. And I look at what the Israelis are doing to try to defend themselves, because if they put down their arms, we know already that terrorists would overrun that country.
No.
Well, we don't agree with you. We may not agree on that, but I've been over there and visited. I've sat with literally Muslims in the Israeli government and had this very conversation. And so we clearly disagree on the right for Israel to protect and defend themselves, which I will always stand up for. I will not compromise. They are a critical ally to our country, and they have a right to exist. And there are people who are trying to literally, in their charter, like Hamas, want to run them into the oceans. And so we may disagree on this policy, but again, this does not mean my support of the state of Israel, which is firm and resolute, does not mean that I'm not one of the people in the United States Senate that works. Most of my visits to that region are meeting with Muslim leaders and Palestinians in the past to make sure that we are doing what we're right to restore, from the human rights resources to critical aid, and more importantly to me, to ultimately get to a just end, which is a two-state solution and the self-determination of peoples, which is something I
Billions of
fundamentally
dollars
believe in.
going to a violent military that suppresses children is not supporting the children. It is not supporting human rights.
You've also deflected on the questions of the executive order. You did not say whether or not you would repeal it or not. You had no answer to that. You furthermore have deflected every time by using scare tactics, by likening Arabs to terrorists. We're not a hive mind. We deserve human rights. And I want you again to answer yes or no. Are you going to repeal the executive order, which is hurting my ability to resist my oppression as a person of color and as a Palestinian? And are you going to, again, take away military funding or redirect that military funding to children who are, yes, Arab, and yes, proud to be Arab, and deserve the humanity that any other person deserves? That you're refusing to talk about, and you're deflecting every single time by using talking points like Hamas and like Hezbollah. Tell me yes or no.
Folks, I think
Tell me yes or no. I want a yes or no from the candidate.
So no, I will not redirect funding. I will put more funding into affirming human rights and dignity of folks, but I'm not going to redirect funding. Yeah, that's a no
Shame.
question.
Thank you. And the second question, again, the executive order. Will you repeal the executive order or not?
Which executive order? I'm sorry.
The one that conflates Judaism as a nationality and has silenced the ability for SJP activists and Jewish Voice Peace activists to do their work.
I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about, but again,
You should look
I
into it.
will continue to oppose what this administration has done to undermine peace and security,
We're with
to
JP
deny,
activists, and I
to
would love
deny,
if you would reach out to
to
them.
deny Palestinians in that region fundamental basic human rights. America needs to go back to doing that funding. And again, I appreciate your passion and what you're saying, but I would never equate something I fought against quite strongly. These are not talking points. There are real, serious terrorist groups in that region that threaten us. Hezbollah has killed a lot of Americans.
Who is us?
And I am talking about the people that are threatening the state of Israel and are doing things every single day to plot and plan. Well, clearly we're not going to agree on that. Wait, I'm just grateful for you all taking the time. I'm going to jump into, can I give a little bit of more of an introduction if I can? And then we'll do Q&A. Okay?
Be outside if anyone wants to talk.
We have information outside if anybody's interested in why we're here.
Give them a round of applause. They've come a long way.
I forgot my phone, sorry.
That's allowed.
Well, this is Iowa nice in another demonstration right now. Thank you.